Hey folks, how you doing? My name's Dave McRae. Yeah, so we're talking about Freddy Krueger and A Nightmare on Elm Street today. Yeah, so this is a replica glove from the very first Nightmare on Elm Street. This sucker actually is quite sharp, believe it or not. And yeah, I answer the door in this glove. I go to the grocery store and pick up some milk. I drive with it. I shake hands with it. I've cut a lot of people. Lost a lot of friends, and I pick my nose with it. I cut my sandwiches with it. It's just great. But anyway, yes, we're talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger today. So let me bust this thing off here. Let me just takes a few seconds to get it off here. Put it over there. It's a delicate piece of memorabilia. So there we go. Okay. So yes, Freddy Krueger and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Well, A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I think it's one of the best horror movies ever made, one of the best slasher horror movies ever made. When it came out in 1984, I was 5, so I was not in the theater watching it, but I certainly was a huge Freddy Krueger fan. It's a dream come true to have that glove because when I was a kid, I used to, of course, we didn't have Freddy Krueger gloves, and it was just before when they were releasing those Freddy Krueger gloves with the plastic knives. It was just kind of before that time, and I actually got a winter glove, and I got 4 Bic ballpoint pens, and I taped them to the end of the to the end of the fingers, and I'm outside. I'm like 6 years old, and I'm outside on the street. So this is like 1985, right? And I'm walking along the sidewalk. Oh no, we didn't even have a sidewalk. It was like a ditch. And I'm walking along, the side of the ditch, and my friend Johnny, who was my next door neighbor, is kind of, he's playing along, right? He's being chased by me, and I'm walking along like Freddy, and I got my winter glove with these sharp, big ballpoint pens. What could be lethal in and of themselves, you know what I mean? So, just kind of funny. So it's kind of a dream come true. Now that I'm 38 years old, I actually have a real Freddy Krueger glove. It's kind of awesome. That's why guys our age, when we go to like fan expos or Comic-Cons and we see all this stuff, like the kid comes out, you know what I'm saying? You're like, oh my God, we really don't need it. We don't need it. But that's not the point. We want it. Okay. Anyway, so one of my favorite horror movies of all time, I think the first Elm Street is the best of the series. I actually, believe it or not, like the very unpopular A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And the reason for that is not because of the homosexual, gay undertones of the film. Has nothing to do with that. It's not that I think that was somehow, inventive and really cool for the time, even though it kind of was for the time. I mean, this is 1985. But it's not that I like that angle of it or anything like that. I don't dislike it. It's neutral to me. There's some funny scenes in the movie because of that, like when Jesse is dancing on the bed, which is kind of funny. But that being said, what I really like about A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is that Freddy is still really scary. He's still really, really scary. And of course, he's really scary in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1. The fan favorite, as Robert Englund has often said, is usually A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. And I like that film too. I think actually Part 1, 2, and 3 make sort of a nice trilogy. And you could actually go from A Nightmare on Elm Street 1 to A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And Part 3 could actually act as sort of the unofficial sequel to the first Elm Street. Because of course it brings back some of the original players and it sort of follows the same kind of story. So I get it. But Elm Street 3 is okay in terms of Freddy's performance, but that's when he sort of started to become a little comedic, right? That's when the real comedy began to come out, like, welcome to prime time, bitch! You know what I mean? Which is fine, it's funny. I think A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is the nice balance. It's a nice balance between funny Freddy, but he's not, he's not like Bob Hope, you know what I mean? He's not on stage being Jim Carrey, right? He's just that kind of nice balance where he's got this kind of comedic edge to him, but he's not going too far, but it's still kind of a scary film. It's still kind of dark and mysterious, and the dreamlike, atmosphere is still kind of really there. So I think Elm Street 3 is the real nice hybrid of both. But once you start to get to 4 and 5 and Freddy's dead and Wes Craven's New Nightmare, however, was a completely different spin. And because it was so different, it was actually really cool, and actually a lot of fans really liked that. But for me, the best of the series is the first Elm Street, because Freddy, very much like Michael Myers, is usually always kept in shadow. Yeah, you do see him a few times, but he's kept in shadow. And with some of the kills, he's not even present, right? Like when Tina gets killed, that's a fucking amazing scene. I would love to do a Nightmare on Elm Street fan film and recreate that scene. I think that would be totally awesome. How I would do that, I don't know yet. I mean, that would up the budget a bit, but it would be really cool to do that. That's an awesome scene when she's up on the wall and then she's up on the roof and Freddy's not even present. Like they do cut back to sort of under the sheets with Freddy sort of on top of her, and you kind of see him a little bit, but it's really, really quick, but you don't see him, and she's just rolling on the ceiling and the blood's coming all amazing. Freddy was fucking scary in that movie. So where is the reboot of A Nightmare on Elm Street? Well, there was one that came out. I went to the theater to see it, and I thought it was, again, like most modern day horror films, there are some redeeming qualities about it. It's not a completely garbage film like, I don't know, Halloween 5, which I struggle to find any redeeming qualities in that film. I mean, Halloween 5, even the Myers house looks like some gothic mansion. Like, you couldn't find just a regular looking house, even if it looked nothing like the Myers house. It was still sort of a 2-story, one-dimensional, old kind of wartime home. Maybe it didn't look anything like the Myers house, but it still looked like a simple home. Even that would be forgivable. But the fucking, like, almost this gothic, ethereal-looking mansion in Halloween 5, who the hell's your production designer, man? Like, you dropped the ball on that. I mean, that's like the Elm Street house going from that to, like, some mansion. Anyway, that being said, we're talking about Elm Street. So, look, one of the main reasons why the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street, which came out in 2010, didn't work, is something Robert Englund said this actually at in a couple of interviews about it, and I actually agree with him. This isn't necessarily the main reason, and it certainly might not even be the biggest reason overall, which I guess is the main reason. I said the same thing twice. I know, shut up. And it has nothing to do with Jackie Earle Haley. I think actually his portrayal of Freddy Krueger was good. I like that they went maybe a little more, like, in terms of remakes, in terms of doing something a bit different, taking a risk, right? Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But I actually found Jackie Earle Haley all right. I thought his performance was fine. His version of Freddy Krueger was fine. I think it didn't fail because of him. It failed because of everything around it. The construction and execution around this Elm Street. When we meet our protagonists, they're already suffering from these dreams, right? Our main girl, our Nancy, is already suffering from these dreams. But when we meet Heather Langenkamp's Nancy in the first Elm Street, she's not suffering from it yet, right? Our hero is learning about her friends having these weird dreams. And then, of course, it starts to catch up to her as well. So we get to kind of see them hanging out together, and they're relatively happy and they're relatively okay. For all intents and purposes, as Nancy even says at the beginning of the movie, Tina, everybody has a bad dream once in a while. Like, it's no big deal, right? So we get to see them kind of in this sort of dynamic of everything's kind of cool. So we're thrust into that. We are living vicariously through these characters in that moment. Whereas in the remake, there's much more of a separation between us and Rooney Mara's character. At least I feel there is. We didn't see her away from that. We didn't see her sort of happy and go lucky and maybe a little more kind of normal. She was already just, which, okay, that's how they wrote it. But there was this disconnect immediately from the audience and the movie. And when you have somebody who's a central figure, when you have a Laurie Strode, when you have a Nancy Thompson, I know her name wasn't Nancy Thompson in the remake, but it was Nancy, but it wasn't Nancy Thompson, it was Nancy something else. But when you have a central figure that we are supposed to live sort of vicariously through, it's very important that at the beginning of the film, that person and the audience are in, if not the same position, very similar positions. And we see the transition on screen. So we're going through this transition with our main character. And that didn't happen in the remake from A Nightmare on Elm Street. And Robert Englund said that in his own way. I'm sort of saying it in my way, but I agree with him 100%. I don't necessarily think that was the main reason. There were other problems to the film, but it definitely, right out of the gate, there's a disconnect. So the film sort of seems over there the whole way through, whereas you want to feel a part of this. And even though it came out in 1984, and even though it's, 33 years old now, it is arguably, you still feel this connection to Nancy when you watch it. I think it's important going forward when they will reboot A Nightmare on Elm Street again, that not only is it important who you cast as Freddy Krueger, of course, that's always important, much more important than who you cast as Michael Myers. Not totally. It is important who you cast as Michael Myers because there is a walk, there is a body language, there is a presence and an essence about the character that you want to have on screen. But because Freddy Krueger is a verbal character and uses more of his body language and his body to help sell himself, of course, that is a really important, who you cast is really, really, really important. But keeping Freddy in the shadows, taking a page from Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, even A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Even though we see him a bit more in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, he's still usually always in shadow and in the dark. Watch this one scene. If you ever watch A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 again, this scene always sticks out to me. Oh my God. Watch it. There's this scene, the pool party, towards sort of I guess it's sort of maybe at the end of the second act, maybe the beginning of the third act, but that pool party that Jesse's friend is having, right? And so everybody's over and the pool party's happening and Freddy makes his appearance. There's this scene where it's the whole scene. There's this shot where it's a close up, like from here up, okay? And Freddy's just looking like this. He's like facing this way, but he's just looking like this, and the flames are kind of in the foreground from, I forget if it's the fire pit from the party or if something's knocked over and there's actually something on fire. But anyway, regardless, there's these flames in the foreground and you can see through the flames at Freddy's face, but his face isn't the comical sort of, pepperoni pizza that we see in like Freddy's Dead, right? A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, where he's, you see him in broad daylight and it looks, he looks like a clown almost. No, this is like, it's this dark sort of, maybe I could find an image and if I can, I'll pop it up during editing, but there's just this image of Freddy and he's just looking like this. It's just like this, and it's just, he looks creepy and dark, and then he just kind of walks like this, and the way Robert Englund, his body language in that film, the way he walks, and he just sort of turns, and and he's walking like this, and he just kind of turns his head like this, and he walks into the bushes, and he essentially dematerializes, and I love it. That's the Freddy I want to see. I don't want to see Freddy Krueger playing video games. Oh, got you. I don't want to. What the hell is that? It doesn't mean he can't be a little comedic with some one-liners, maybe, but I want to be scared. This is A Nightmare on Elm Street. This isn't a fluffy dream on Elm Street. So when they do remake A Nightmare on Elm Street, and like I said, they will, I want them to go back to the roots of who Freddy was, to keep him in darkness, very much like Michael Myers, right? Keep him in the darkness, only bring him out when you need to. Keep him fucking scary, man. So anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I just wanted to sort of talk briefly about A Nightmare on Elm Street. Those are two things that I think they need to do going forward when they remake it. Keep it small. Don't make it big. Keep this an independent feeling. If Blumhouse gets the rights to do A Nightmare on Elm Street like they are with Halloween, I think they could do a good job. They specialize in creating low-budget feeling sort of horror films that maybe feel a bit bigger but act really small, and the executions are fantastic. So for the most part, okay, not everything they do is great, but for the most part, they understand that. So keep it small, keep Freddy scary. I mean, really scary. I mean, it's a mature psychological, it's like the movie Seven, right? The maturity that movie has. I'm not talking about the execution. It's a thriller psychological drama. It's a much higher sort of end film, okay? I'm just talking about the overall feeling and tone of that movie. Like when Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman are walking into things, you know what I mean? They're like, what the fuck's going on? You know, the whole tone that David Fincher brought to that film, bring that essence, that kind of tone to A Nightmare on Elm Street, that mature tone. I want to see that. You know, that tone, Wes Craven brought that tone to the first Elm Street. It was 1984. It was 11 years before 7. But it had that maturity to it, okay? Yes, it's dated because it's 1984, but there was that sense of mature. I want to see that. That's what I want to see. I want my Freddy Krueger to be scary again. So going forward, keep Freddy in the shadows, keep him fucking scary, and put us in the same position as our protagonist, Nancy, if you have her name Nancy. But put us in the same position so we can see this transition together. We are Nancy. That's what Wes Craven did. When we watch that film, we are living vicariously through Nancy. When we watch Halloween, we are Laurie Strode. And that's what you got to do. Anyways, folks, comment below and let me know. I might have some more thoughts in the future about A Nightmare on Elm Street, but those are sort of the gist of my thoughts right now until new information comes down the pipe on whether or not they are going to do it. They will. But I mean, you know, sort of, yeah. When new information comes down, I'll upload some more thoughts. Those are my sort of thoughts right now about A Nightmare on Elm Street. Comment below and let me know your thoughts on Freddy Krueger and A Nightmare on Elm Street. What's your favorite Elm Street and why? What do you want to see from a remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street? Comment below and let me know. Who do you think would make a really good Freddy Krueger? I want to know all this shit, guys. Comment below and let me know. I'll talk to you guys soon. I gotta put the sucker on. I'll talk to you soon, bitches. Comment below and let me know.